What's up, class? It's Mr. Tomei. Here we are again. Another TED Talk. Hashtag subscribe. Um, Here is what we're going to do today. We're going to go from slide 17 to 40. And then we're going to do one more video after this that I will post at some point this week. And then expect the test to be live at some point next week. We'll talk more about the test. We still got to do review and things like that. But that'll be sometime next week. Okay? For now, though, let's just focus on slides 17 through 40. So I'm going to give you a second here to get the Google Slides up and going. You'll go to slide 17 to start. It should say Yalta Conference, and that is where we're going to begin. So I will give you a second to get there. Okay, so if you aren't there yet, just pause the video, but if you are, let's keep going. So for slide 17, we're now at the Yalta Conference. This is in February of 1945. So we finished the last video after the Battle of the Bulge. And after that battle, Germany has exhausted pretty much all of its resources. Not much else it's going to be able to do to really fight against this Allied advance. So, with the Allies knowing this, they met at the Yalta Conference, okay? And this conference was mainly for determining what the world was going to look like after the war. So the Yalta Conference was held in February of 1945. And what I've bolded there at the slide at the bottom is the most important thing. And the most important thing of this meeting was how Germany and Berlin, which is the capital of Germany, how was it going to be split up by the Allies? They knew that, hey, we're going to win this war. So how are we going to really handle the splitting up of Germany, since we all fought for, control of Germany, or at least to have a bit of Germany. And so all the main leaders of the Allied powers were there. So let's go to the next slide. Slide 18. So there you see the big three leaders, as they were known as back then, sitting down. On the left is Winston Churchill. In the middle is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And on the right is Joseph Stalin. Again, Winston Churchill represents the United Kingdom. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, represents the United States. And Stalin, as we know, represents the Soviet Union. If you're wondering where this is, the Yalta Conference, this is in Yalta. It's in the Soviet Union. So that's where they met. Let's go ahead and now go to slide 19, because this slide is very important. Okay, and I got to explain it. So, in slide 19, you should see what is a map. This map is a zoomed in area of Germany. And you're going to see kind of some different colors and flags, and I'm going to explain that. First off, just to let you know what the flags are. The blue, white, and red flag, that's France. In the bottom kind of left corner, that's France. The one that makes a white cross, that's a different country. Don't worry about it, okay? But the blue, white, and red flag, that is France. The one above that, the Union Jack, okay, that's in the green area, that's the United Kingdom. The Soviet Union is to the right of that in the red area. It's just pretty much the red flag. And then obviously you guys know what the U.S. flag looks like in the orange colored area. There's also, you see what looks like a white and red flag to the right of the red area. That is Poland. But again, don't really worry about that. What we're going to focus on is the colored areas. So the area that's colored in green, orange, red, and blue. Germany was split up, and this was the plan. Germany was going to be split up into about 4 different regions. The British would have the north and the western region of, of Germany. This is because it was closest to their country, right? If we could zoom out of this map, the United Kingdom would be just off that coastline a couple hundred miles away. So the United Kingdom had that territory. France took what is known as the Rhineland, which is kind of in the west and in the south, and they took that area because that borders their country and their area, so it was easy for them to occupy. To the south, that would be the United States. That would be their occupational zone. And it's a pretty decent size, so they had that area. That's like Bavaria, kind of the territory that would be there. And then to the east is the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is going to have the eastern portion of Germany. And if you also were to look, okay, you see that Berlin is split up as well. It's split up in a similar way. Berlin, within that red territory of the Soviet Union, you'll see there's like multiple colors. That's Berlin, because Berlin, the capital itself, was also split up by the Allies. And this is important because we're going to talk about this when we start our Cold War unit. And the splitting up of Germany is huge because it changes the landscape of the world for the next 50 years after this event, and even to this day to an extent. But we'll talk more about that in the Cold War unit. I just wanted you to see that. We'll go back to this image soon. So let's go to slide number 20 now. So we're now here at the fall of Mussolini. It was in April 1945. Following the invasion of Italy, Italians began to lose confidence in Mussolini. They were, there's a lot more questions about his leadership abilities, his qualities and such. They ultimately decided to give power back to the king, who then immediately put Mussolini under arrest. Mussolini tried to flee and go to Switzerland, but he was captured and he was killed. The image there to the right just shows him and kind of his henchmen when they were caught. So Mussolini goes from being one of the most powerful people in the world to now being hung upside down, and with him and his henchmen. And he was beaten pretty much to death, and the people were cheering in the city where he was caught. So just ironic that at one point a person and a man who was praised so much was hung upside down like an animal, like a piece of meat, and was, cheered and booed at for his death. Kind of surreal. Let's go to slide 21. Now we're at the fall of Hitler. Again, as the Allies approach, the end is inevitable for Germany. They're going to lose. So as Germany was nearing defeat and Berlin was under invasion, so now you have people in the capital city, Hitler took cover in an underground bunker. And with all hope lost, Hitler committed suicide by shooting himself in the head. There was no he was captured, fight to the last person, like he's told his soldiers to do. He killed himself. And a lot of Hitler's cronies and a lot of his A1 people that are right next to him, they followed a similar pattern. They killed themselves. Oftentimes they would kill themselves and their own families. You can look and read all into that if you want. There's plenty of articles about what happened to the people that are by Hitler. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of this unit. All right, so let's go to slide 22. The race to Berlin. This is actually really important, especially for our next unit. Berlin is the capital because everyone wants to get to Berlin. The Allies want to get there because if you get to Berlin, that's the capital, and then you get to raise your flag over the capital. Be like, someone raising a flag over the White House. Like if Mexico ever invaded, it'd be a very cool gesture for them and their people to have the Mexican flag over the White House, right? And so there's the symbolic aspect to that. And also when you capture the capital, you're going to capture all the important people, because all the important people, for the most part, are going to be found at the capital. And that gives you a lot of leverage in negotiations and kind of going forward, some of the things that you can get, in return for hostages and such. So as we know, Hitler committed suicide on May 2nd in 1945 in his bunker, and while the Battle of Berlin rages above him, it's only a matter of days, pretty much until Germany officially surrenders on March 8th, 1945. So go to slide 23. I want you to watch this video about the Soviet Union capturing Berlin. I want you to notice kind of the urban fighting, the destruction of a massive, at one point was one of the most cosmopolitan, metropolitan cities in the world, and just see how the city is completely destroyed in ruins. So I'm going to pause here, give you a second to watch the video. When you're done watching the video, come back and we'll continue. All right, here we go. So you saw that video, you saw the destruction of the capital city of Berlin, you saw how, pretty much the Soviet Union was able to raise their flag, and it was a very powerful moment for them. Again, I want you to think about that, because we're going to go back to that when we get to the Cold War. So let's go to slide 24. That's just a picture that shows you people across the world celebrating. This was known as VE Day, so VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. But, again, is the war over? No, because we have to deal with what's going on in Japan. And that's where we're going to shift our focus for the next, rest of this video. So let's go ahead and go to slide 25. Slide 25, this just goes to show you the war leaders in the Pacific. The U.S. was led by General Douglas MacArthur. He's on the right with the big old cog pipe. Japan was led by Admiral Yamamoto. He's on the left. Both are considered to be some of the greatest military leaders and strategic minds of all time. Just wanted to figure and include that. Okay. If we remember, the last time we talked about the Pacific was the island hopping strategy and what that followed after Pearl Harbor. So that's what we're going to pick up, and we're going to talk about actually specific battles as we get closer and closer and closer to Japan. So we'll start here on slide 26. The Battle of Midway. About a 4-day battle. This lasted from June 4th to the 7th, 1942. The Battle of the Midway was the first big island battle of the war in the Pacific. Now remember, these islands are not big. They're only a couple miles long, maybe a mile wide. They're big enough for, some bases, maybe a sick bay, sometimes only big enough maybe for a runway. But they're all important, as we talked about, for capturing islands in a gigantic Pacific Ocean, so you can continue to launch attacks and creep closer to your enemy. Japan attempted to launch a surprise attack on Midway. This was one of the furthest Pacific bases for the U.S. during this time period. But, in a huge upset, the U.S. won. And it was recognized as a big turning point in the war. Because now we proved that we could hang tough with the Japanese. It gave our navies and our soldiers confidence, and encouraged the general public to really get behind the war effort. So let's go to slide 27. That just shows you some pictures. Again, if you ever want to just read about this stuff, go about it, read it, search on Google, watch videos. Anything you want to help you understand, you can. Okay, since you're not going to be able to ask me questions unless you email me during these live lectures. Okay, let's keep going. Battle 28. Again, don't write what's in red, just write what's in black. So now we have the next big battle. We're going to just fast forward for the sake of time about 3 years. This is the Battle of Iwo Jima. At this point, the United States has been very successful in its island hopping campaign, and Japan is beginning to recede. Remember, we had that big map at the beginning of the unit where we talked about how much territory Japan has. But now at this point, that territory is beginning to collapse, and eventually they're only going to have control of Japan itself. So the Battle of Iwo Jima, this is from February to March of 1945, a little over a month. Iwo Jima is an island just kind of off the coast of Japan, not very far. And this Japanese-controlled island had about 3 airfields. So it had a decent amount of airfields. It was a decent-sized island. The Japanese were willing to fight to the very last man and had developed extensive underground tunnel systems throughout this volcanic island. And yeah, my fun fact is, one of my favorite movies is actually called Letters from Iwo Jima. That's one of the movies you can watch for the project. It's all about the battle from the Japanese perspective, which is kind of cool because a lot of times we watch movies and it's always about the perspective from, the Americans or such. Okay. Let's go to slide 29. That's the most famous image from this battle. You've probably seen that picture before, but that's where it takes place. The soldiers raising the flag. We'll go to slide 30. Again, that's just the statue and memorial of it. This is what the island looked like on slide 31. That's kind of the volcanic dome, and that's where all the fighting was done. The Japanese kind of had very extensive tunnel systems in and throughout that dome. That was where they would conduct, the majority of their operations and such. Slide 32, that's just the poster for it, for the movie. And then we'll go to slide 43. This is the bloodiest battle of World War II. This is about a 3-month battle from April to June of 1945. It's the bloodiest battle in World War II. Okinawa was the real last forward island of the Japanese military at this point. After Okinawa, the next logical attack is Japan. So losing Okinawa would pretty much open up unlimited access for the Allies and mainly the Americans to attack Japan with little planning. It's so close they'd just be able to launch attacks, never ending almost. Japan once again used pretty elaborate tunnel systems, and they used suicide attacks and this whole last man standing mentality to hold out for as long as possible. In total, the U.S. lost 20,000 men who were killed in action. Another 55,000 men were injured. The Japanese, however, lost 80,000 soldiers, plus another 100,000 local civilians who were either committed suicide or were killed in the battle. 100,000 people, for perspective, that's about 2/3 the size of Hayward. That's about the size of San Leandro, San Lorenzo. I mean, that's a huge number of civilians. It was a huge battle, a huge loss for the Japanese. The Japanese were going to be willing to fight to the last man. If we go to slide 34, you kind of just see the conditions of the island. You actually even see the little boys in kind of military uniforms. Young kids were being required to fight. There's videos of mothers of civilians, right, with their babies jumping from the cliffs. There was the fear of there was great shame, there was no honor in being captured by your enemy, so it's better to die in battle. And this existed in the brains and the culture of the civilians that were on the island. They were not going to want to get captured. So many either took up arms or committed suicide to not be captured by the United States forces. This was intense fighting. Soldiers were running with grenades into foxholes where U.S. soldiers were, willing to kill themselves to support Japan and save Japan. The horrors and the atrocities that existed in this battle are important because we're going to eventually talk about the dropping of the atomic bomb. And there's a lot of debate today of whether or not that was the right decision. It's my perspective, and it is my belief that the horrors that we're seeing in these attacks, and it'll be demonstrated more in a second, the willingness of the Japanese to fight to the last man, woman, child, the civilians who would take up arms and or kill themselves instead of being captured, provided the justification that was needed to drop the atomic bombs instead of launching an invasion of Japan. We'll talk more about that in the next video. So let's go to slide 35. That just kind of goes to show you what the battle, what was there. Obviously, the plants and everything are destroyed. That's a flamethrower being, shot from, right? 36. If you want to know kind of really the battle and you want to know more, you can go to YouTube and watch videos. But you can also watch Hacksaw Ridge. That's one of the videos that I told you guys to watch. Since we're on practically quarantine, take advantage. Watch these movies. They're about 2.5 hours, Since you have the time, I suggest watching them. Because remember, you get a lot of extra credit points if you do it. Okay, we're almost done. We're going to do slides 37, 38, 39, and 40. They're all about kamikazes. And then that's what we'll end today. So, kamikaze. The direct translation from Japanese to English means divine wind. And as we've seen so far, Japan was slowly losing its control in the Pacific. At this point, they had pretty much lost all their control. The Japanese, at this point, became desperate. And in an attempt to turn the tide of war back in their favor, Japanese pilots became ordered to launch kamikaze attacks, or suicide attacks. Pretty much what they would do is they'd load their planes or jets full of gas and other explosive like bombs and such, and they would guide their planes into American ships or airfields or anything else, oftentimes with the goal of hoping to sink these American ships or inflict mass casualties. So you'd have these ships pretty much loaded up with a lot of explosives, and when they crashed, it was like a guided missile. Just think about how that would be in the mind of a Japanese kamikaze pilot. You've just been told you're a kamikaze pilot, and now you know you're going to have to die for Japan. And you're going to have to kill yourself, and you're going to have to guide this jet in while getting shot at. And you know it's only a matter of seconds before your life is over. That shows the level the Japanese were willing to go to fight against the Allies. And this is very important. Like I said, this helps provide the justification that, if we go to invade Japan, that's going to create even more casualties. It might just be better to drop these super heavy nuclear bombs on them, and we actually might save lives. We'll get to that, though, in a couple days. Only about 20% of kamikaze attacks were successful, but for the American soldier, caused a lot of stress, paranoia. The idea that someone in a jet would be willing to use that jet to kill themselves and try to hurt you, it created a lot of stress, a lot of stress. We'll go to slide 38. That just kind of is a kamikaze pilot. To the right is a actual successful kamikaze pilot attack on a ship. That's aboard a ship. That's the picture from the top of the aircraft carrier. Go to slide 39. This is real video of kamikazes. I'll pause for a second here so you can watch the video. Okay. And we're going to finish here at slide 40. This is just the kamikaze perspective, and it reads, this is from their pilot's manual. This is what they would have been given. When you eliminate all thoughts about life and death, you will be able to totally disregard your earthly life. This will also enable you to concentrate your attention on eradicating the enemy with unwavering determination, meanwhile reinforcing your excellence in flight skills. Reread that a couple times, but it's the idea, and the big line I take away from it is to be able to totally disregard your earthly life. So in the manual, when you were getting training, you knew, even before you got in a cockpit, you knew that you were going to have to give up your life via suicide attack for the purpose of supporting Japan. Today, that would, especially in the United States, imagine that would never happen. But this was in manuals. This was government-issued manuals to these kamikaze pilots. So it goes to show you how willing the Japanese were to try and protect their mainland, to try and protect their efforts to win the war. And this is huge, like I said, when we start talking about the ability and the reasons and the justification for why we should drop the atomic bomb. We're going to talk more about that in the next video. But today, just to recap, we covered the splitting up of Germany after the war, the fall of Hitler and Mussolini, the victory in Europe, and then kind of how it all is beginning to end for the Japanese. So things are ending pretty quickly here. Obviously, I would go into more detail in class. I would give you more work, but because of what we're in, I got to give you the skinny version. If you want to read up more, I have questions, be my guest. You can go online. Obviously, you can always email me for further clarification. Remember, when it comes time for the test, go back and use these videos, right? You can use all this stuff to do well on the test. We'll post one more video in the next coming days, but in the meantime, stay safe and make sure to hashtag subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day.